All right, welcome everyone to the November 2022 episode of the Midwest Big Data Innovation Hub Data Science Student Group webinar series. I'm John McMullen, I'm the Executive Director of the Midwest Hub. I'm joined here today by JD Graham from our team, who's an outreach specialist. And I believe that we have one of our student interns joining today as well. But we're also very excited to have a group of faculty, staff, and students from Iowa State University joining us today to talk about their Data Science for the Public Good Young Scholars program that is hosted at Iowa State. Before we introduce that group, I want to introduce who we are to those who may not be familiar with the Midwest Hub. We are part of a national network of 4 hubs that is funded by the National Science Foundation. So we have a national footprint across the country and partner with the other 3 hubs on a regular basis. But here in the Midwest, we have a 12-state area that we work directly with for a variety of data science and data-related activities in a number of different theme areas. Really focused overall on engaging with different communities, sharing resources, and building new collaborations around data. So we're happy to talk with anyone who is in the Midwest and interested in collaborating in new ways. But if you're watching this video from outside the Midwest, we definitely encourage you to reach out to the hub that is in your area and get engaged with them as well. So this particular webinar series is focused on taking that community building lens and focusing that on students and student organizations, really with the goal of trying to build a regional network of students and their student organizations that cuts across some of the interdisciplinary and institutional boundaries that a lot of those groups have. Student groups tend to be either at one school or run by a larger organization in a particular discipline or focus area. And so we're trying to cut across some of those boundaries and bring people together across the region and across their interest areas to talk about how data impacts the work that they're doing as students and really learn from their organizational activities about what has been effective to them leading student organizations. What are some of the activities and programs that have been beneficial to them in building their local communities? So if you are a student group leader or an advisor for a student group, we'd be happy to talk with you about participating in this webinar series. We also have a student group profile series on our website that gets into some of those best practices and Q&A discussions about your experiences. So feel free to reach out to us. We also have a Slack community where folks can engage outside of the webinar to talk about those experiences as well. So today we're very excited to have an opportunity to hear about an innovative program for early career scholars that engages with local communities around their needs involving data and other aspects of their local communities. So I'd like at this point to turn it over to Professor Dorius from Iowa State to introduce this program and then introduce her colleagues who are on the call as well to talk about their particular engagement on the program. So Cass, I'll stop sharing here and turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, John. It is a pleasure to be here, and we're excited to talk with you today about not just DSPG, but our model of outreach, which is the community learning through data-driven discovery model. And as we talk about this, we're going to talk about the way that this model works for us across a couple of different opportunities. So, for example, we use the community learning through data-driven discovery model in our research projects, in our programs, and in our teaching. And we're going to go through 3 of those examples today. So our research program, we're going to be talking with Dr. Chris Seeger, with Chris Seeger, who's going to talk about the Data Science for the Public Good program. I'll jump back on this. And then we will be handing it over to Shawn Dorius, who's going to be talking about the internship program that we have around community learning through data-driven discovery. And then we'll pass it off to our wonderful 3 students who are going to share what their experience has been. Now, all 3 of these students have been involved in a data science for the public good program, and they're going to talk about it from their first year, which is Harun, their second year, which is Matt, who did his project 2 years ago, and then the third year out, which is Kelsey van Selous, and she's going to talk about how did this grow and develop, and now is part of her own dissertation work. So part of this approach that we have, this community learning through data-driven discovery. All right, let me see. So part of this approach that we have is we're really thinking about this as a model of outreach. And this model of outreach follows this sort of wheel that you see on the screen in front of you. And the outer part of the wheel is all of the different ways that we engage with people in the communities. So I love this opportunity that we had to come forward and chat with you. And that was because we heard that you were data scientists who wanted to work with communities. And this is our model. The data science framework is core and integral. It's the very heart and soul of what we do. And then we wrap it in engagement opportunities, especially with communities of both place and interest. That middle wheel is the data-driven learning process. We go and discover data. We have a formal data discovery process. We integrate that data. We reach back to the university. We bring subject matter experts on board with us. And then I think the thing that makes this very special is we take the information back to the communities and we facilitate conversations that lead to action. So right now, I do a lot of work in the public health field. The average length of time between when you publish something and what gets implemented in policy and practice is 17 years. And the community learning through data-driven discovery wheel is really about shortening that lag time and helping move what we can learn through our cutting-edge data science techniques into action right away to support communities. And then we measure and evaluate how did these actions work? And through that process, people often come up with their own new questions, in which case we redirect and try again. Now, I'm going to give one quick example, and I won't spend much time on this, but I'll tell you our very first project we did, because I mentioned that we can do this for projects, programs, and our teaching. The 3 ways we interact with our students. So here was a project we did in Marshalltown, Iowa. Now, Marshalltown is right near the center of our state. It's racially diverse, and it's quite small, less than 30,000 people. In Marshalltown, we went to the mayor and city leaders, and we said, what is your most pressing problem? And they told us it is transportation. We increasingly are getting calls and complaints about our system, and our bus ridership is going down. What can we do? So we went in and we did a demographic analysis and a geospatial analysis, and high five to Chris, who will be speaking in just a minute. You know, we really thought about where are the neighborhoods and what is their access to transportation. And at the end, we found what you may not be surprised to hear, that elderly and minority citizens were being underserved. And this was part of that data integration phase of CLD3 that you can see on the bottom. So we took this and moved it into the action phase, took the data, took the maps, and went and talked with the mayor. And then the mayor's office went and took all of this information to city council and did a display of all of the maps and said, this is what we have and this is what we need. And Marshalltown acted. And one of the benefits of this was they won the state award for most increased ridership, and they won a national award for most increased ridership. And the thing that was sort of special for our team is we knew that they weren't just increasing riders, they were increasing riders from the most vulnerable citizen areas of their communities. And so they were helping the people who needed it most. And as part of our redirect, this moved forward. And this moved into a couple of new funding opportunities, as well as a permanent placement of some of this dashboard material on the Marshalltown City website. So here's one of the examples of how we might use CLD3 in our work, but I'm going to pass it to Chris, who talks about how do we do this from a student-informed program, like data science for the public good, which Chris and Shawn helped co-found and co-direct.
All right, thank you. Make sure everybody's able to see that. Give me a quick thumbs up. Very good. Thank you. Well, thank you, Cass. Yes, so continuing with the data science for public good, I've had the opportunity to be involved as a program leader, co-PI on it, and also this last year going ahead and directing the program. And so, as Cass said, this program, it's built upon the community learning through data-driven discovery framework. And the thing to notice on this is a lot of our focus is put into the discovery of data or data discovery part of this model. But the projects, each project varies, and some projects are able to move forward and they start to integrate data, and a few of them even start to work with a client to start to act on the data or prepare things so that the client can act on the data. The program itself that we've put together, is a 10-week intensive summer program that we produce here at Iowa State. Students have the opportunity to learn and apply data science tools to help us solve real problems in communities. Now, these problems might be social, health, economic, environmental, but there's a wide variety of things that we can work with. Typically, we have about 12 students that are involved with this program. So like I said, we've had 3 years now at Iowa State doing DSPG. It did start out in the first 2 years. We collaborated with other states, state in Virginia and Oregon, and worked with them on the project and shared resources. And this 3rd year is our first year to kind of go on our own. But to date, we've had 27 undergraduate students, 9 graduate students, 9 faculty and professional leads. That's a small number. There's been way more people involved helping us do this. We've worked on 18 projects. And what's interesting is at least 50% of those projects actually have continued after DSPG with additional work, research grants, or outreach. So very positive success rate. I also want to mention the picture I show here. As the students are doing this, I mentioned that they are learning and doing at the same time. And so in the first years, students were working with creating DSPG packages in R so that we could reuse some of the tools as we work through some of these data issues in Iowa. So our students, they're put into a team, project team. Typically, a project team is going to have 3 undergraduate students and 1 graduate student. That's their team leader. Each student is involved with 2 projects. We have a slide here showing our alcohol use project that was done in our first year. The projects end with a presentation. That's a public presentation that we have at the end of each year as part of a symposium. Our students, while a lot of them do come from data science and computer science, statistics, as we'd expect, we have many other majors or degrees of interest that these students have had. And so we included history, community regional planning, sociology, artificial intelligence, business, political science. And so each year we start getting a broader set of students brought into the program. In 2020, our first year of the program, COVID did disrupt us. We had planned, had a lot of plans for how we were going to do the program, only have to change them in April for a program that started in end of May. And we ended up going to online that year and online with the 3 universities, or the multiple universities involved with us. But we did 6 projects that summer. One of these that looked at communities and substance reuse or recovery centers. We had 2 projects looking at community capitals. Another one looking at the systems of care to help provide support for state prevention, treatment, and safety response. Again, I mentioned the alcohol prevention efforts, and then also working directly with the extension on their community helpline services. 2021, we continued again, 12 students involved, did 6 projects again. And we had 2 projects that, well, I guess the first we had a project looking at research data, publicly accessible research data, and understand better what we can learn from the repositories about that data and how we can reuse it. 2 projects sponsored by the Department of Human Rights at Iowa, looking at economical workforce development, educational attainment. We've looked at food rescue in central Iowa with Eat Greater Des Moines. We looked at the quality of life in our shrinking communities, which is pretty exciting. And that project is a much larger project that's continuing to go on at Iowa State. And then Iowa's integrated data system for decision-making, specifically looking at early childhood in Iowa. And then this last year in 2022, we continued online, and that provided us an opportunity to still allow students that were not Iowa State students to participate in the program. And we had the same thing in 2021. We had 2 or 3 students that were not at Iowa State that continued that worked with us in the summer. But this past summer, we looked at wholesale food benchmarking, successful employment for persons with disabilities, exploring a measure for analysis for local housing needs. A project that was kind of fun, beginning farmer asset mapping, looking at some agricultural marketing reports, and then a community transportation project. Typical day for a student, we meet throughout the whole week. 8:30, we have a morning coffee, 9 o'clock team meetings, 9:30, they start to go into work session. 12 o'clock, we try and have a brown bag at least once a week or some other presentation, afternoon work sessions. And then really important, each day we end with the daily wrap-up meeting. At the end of the week, we also have a meeting for everybody and kind of a presentation of what they've gotten done that week. And we alternate A, B days, back and forth, project A, project B. Looking ahead to 2023, we're currently accepting nominations for projects to consider for that year. Our student applications are going to be opening up in December or maybe a little bit sooner. And we'll be making decisions on those in February. If people want to apply, they can visit our website, and look forward to hearing from you.
Great, thanks, Chris. So I'm Shawn Dorius. I'm an associate professor of sociology and demography, and I'm going to tell you briefly. Let's see. Are you seeing play mode or? Yeah, great. I'm going to just tell you briefly about another student program that we weave through data science and weaves in and through and around our DSPG program that Chris just talked about. And that's we have a data science, interdisciplinary data science undergraduate program. As part of that project, there's a DS 401, Data Science 401. It's an internship and capstone project. And we've done some fun stuff with students on that I'll just tell you a little bit about. That's a great chance for, let's see if I move that forward. Oops. Let's go back one. Overview of that project. It happens every spring term. It's a capstone project-based course, and it's typically juniors and seniors, and they're pursuing their data science bachelor's degree. And what we set up this internship program that we bring in students, teams of 4 to 5 undergrads, and they'll spend about 5 hours a week working on a collaborative real world project. Very similar in structure and design to DSPG. And I'll tell you about a few of those in a minute. But that project, the students, the way it kind of wraps in is the students, it feeds students into DSPG. They come and they get experience in a small internship program. They learn about this idea of data science and application to real world problems, especially public good problems. They get a chance to learn about the DSPG program and often feeds into an application, to be a successful application of DSPG. It also feeds students into paid internships and research assistantships. It feeds students into the labor market. Here in Iowa, we've sent students from our program to work for the AP as data journalists, John Deere as data scientists, and everything in between just about. And I think for students, one of the best things is just broadly strengthens the portfolio, gives them real world experience, gives them something concrete in their portfolio to go out into the marketplace with some confidence and some excitement, and sometimes some great connections. So I'll tell you about a couple of projects that we've done with this program. One is an analytics project to support executive decision making. There's a group in Iowa called the Health Initiative for People Who Use Drugs. It's called the HIPWOOD Board, and that's a state advisory board of people from across state agencies, universities, community action groups, up and down the public health spectrum. And they meet and provide advice to the state on how to manage a bunch of health risks. And so we put some interns on a project supporting that executive board. They did analytics. They created all kinds of cool insights and brought those to the HIPWOOD board to help with decision making. And that included cleaning data, exploring and describing data, survey data. They created all kinds of visualizations because that advisory board is not full of data scientists or computer scientists or anyone with those kinds of backgrounds. So we needed to take that data science and put it into a format that made sense for the audience. So communicating those key patterns, trends, and insights to that non-technical audience. And then finally, there was a second small piece to that, which was some exploratory analysis, data mining of text corpus from focus groups among people who use drugs. And so there was this quantitative and a text-based, but all quantitative, but a text and numeric-based data sets and some cool insights that informed executive leaders. Another project that we had some data science interns work on, and this fed in and through our DSPG as well, is a data system, is an early warning system to detect overdoses. So interns in that project worked with the public science collaborators, some of those who are here, to develop an overdose-related dashboard and then analytics to feed into that. And the goal there was to build some near real-time analytics to help the Iowa Department of Public Health to improve their monitoring overdoses, overdose deaths, and related risk factors. So at the end of that project, interns were involved in building R code, building data, and then building analytics. For this client, the deliverable was Tableau dashboards, and you can see a screenshot of what some of that looked like for that project. A third and last project I'll talk about is we had a project around stigma. This was a very exploratory project, and we had a student group that came on that had strong interest and aptitude for text analytics. So they got a pretty great idea. This was a co-created project to look at Reddit and to find a cluster of subreddits that talk about and feature a lot of discussion around substance use. And they were looking forward to create some metrics to help us to see when and how and where stigma flows through discourse around substance use. And that ended up involved scraping almost 10 million comments from over 20 subreddits and doing all kinds of analytics, and then looking for some keywords like, junkie and dope stick, some of these words that can be quite stigmatizing to people who have a history of substance use, to see if that's changing and if it's common around certain types of drugs or certain kinds of populations. And this ended up being just a really cool project. We didn't know what we'd expect. The students were super creative, they were super motivated, and just chalked out a ton of analytics. It was just a really great project. So those are the kinds of things that students get to do in those programs. And like I say, many of those end up feeding into DSPG. And with that, I'll stop sharing and I'll hand it over to Harun Çelik.
Thank you. Just a second as I set up my screen here. Can everyone see the presentation? Okay, awesome. So I guess I'll be the real life example of how some of these projects turned out, the first sort of phase of things. Today I'll talk about the successful employment for persons with disabilities in Iowa project. I was the graduate fellow and worked alongside 3 undergrad interns here who I want to give credit, Sonica, Joel, and Shingray. We were all from varying departments. I myself am a graduate student in the history department, and we had some computer science, statistics, and math students. Bailey Hansen was our project lead, and our sponsor was the Iowa Department of Human Rights, who had previously worked with the DSPG program and wanted to learn more about sorry, I'm just blocking my own screen here. Okay. And so, yeah, wanted to learn more about the relationship between persons with disabilities in Iowa and their connection to employment, successful or unsuccessful employment. And for this project, we really divided the project into 2 pathways. The first was a data discovery path, which is designed to help the policymakers in the Department of Human Rights to make better decisions with the data that they now have. And the second one is about service assessment, assessing the impact of publicly funded services and expenditures to persons with disabilities in Iowa. And in particular, the client wanted us to look at this at the county level because this is where they felt that a lot of the data was missing or not very much connected. Here we have the CLD framework, and for DSPG, we work more along the outer circle. And for this particular project, we did a lot of discovering data and integrating data, but I know that the project continues on and will continue in terms of action. And this is something that the clients had also mentioned to us in terms of our success. So in terms of our data sources, we tried to look at a variety of things because we were looking for collection. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, but for demographics, we relied heavily on the American Community Survey. And this was supplemented by local data sets collecting information in Iowa, like this Burfus data set. And also we have some services and expenditures data sets that come from the Iowa Public Data Portal that we could access. And the visualizations that I'll be talking about today are just some of the ones that are on the dashboard that became our finalized result. I will share in the chat the link to that later for those who want to go and interact, because I realize that some of these things are small to see. This first one is just a representation of the percentage of people with disabilities in different counties across Iowa. This is disaggregated by different age groups. If you could see on the column on the right, the key column. We have additional information about ages from ages 18 to 64, and we divided this into 2 particular age groups that match really well with some of our service data sets that I'll be mentioning later on. As you can see, people aged 35 to 64 have higher disability rates overall in Iowa. The ACS also provides us with 6 difficulty types that describe the different disabilities that the ACS collects. And in the dashboard, you can select through those different difficulty types. But here you can see we can visualize that information at the county level, just like our client wanted us to. And ambulatory types, difficulty types have the highest proportion in Iowa. We also tried to look at these things from the perspective of race and ethnicity, tried to break it down in terms of race and ethnicity. And this is what our disability rate showed. So this is the disabled population of race or ethnicity by the total population of that race or ethnicity. And we can see here American Indian and Alaska Native have the highest disability rates, which is something that our clients considered worth taking action for. Here, this is a representation of the Burfus data set. The only real important thing for us to look at now is that the average for this one and the average for the ACS in terms of disabilities per county across Iowa is quite different. And I think this reflects a question towards the Department of Human Rights on how they can better collect information, particularly at the county level for Iowa. For the employment questions, we tried to look at the same data sets, but from the perspective of employment gaps. This map demonstrates the employment gaps between persons with a disability and those without in the state of Iowa. The lighter shades indicate lower gaps, the darker shades indicate higher, so preferably lower is better and exemplary. And we can target specific counties which have the bigger gaps. The same thing here, except here we take the state average for employment and then measure each county based on the state average. Here, the darker is actually higher employment, which is preferable, the lighter being lower. So there are a number of counties which need help with this. And for our services, I will just briefly mention the IVRS, which is the Vocational Rehabilitation Services. Here we can see the total cases served by federal fiscal year. Here we can see calculations about wage increases, decreases, and no changes to better assess whether the vocational rehabilitation services functioned as they should or not. And ultimately, I wanted to include this because data is fun, but not always friendly. When you're trying to look for things at a county level, you might not find them. And that was the case for a lot of our data sets. The IVRS is a good example because this is the way that the IVRS services regions in Iowa. And so whether we want to have a more granular, or a broad sort of assessment really depends on the way that data is collected. And this is a point that we tried to illustrate with visualizations like this. So here's I want to share this in the chat if I can. I can share afterwards, actually. I can't seem to find the chat. Oh, there it is. Sorry. So that's the link. I'll just play a small video here to demonstrate some of the interactiveness of the dashboards. This is the main page. The dashboard section has all of our visualizations. Here was the earlier visualization. You can go through and select particular age groups or particular counties. This one with the difficulty types, you can select different difficulty types. You can exclude values if, for example, certain areas in Iowa have higher density in population. So you might want to exclude them so that you can look at averages that way. And you can look at particular regions in Iowa so that you have a better understanding of how certain regions act in terms of publicly funded services rather than a whole Iowa sort of centric view. And ultimately, as Chris was saying, we made sure that we documented everything. And so all of our data sources, utilized or unutilized, as well as all the calculations that our students went through are also on this page, as you can see here. This is all our code. It's reproducible in that way. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and looking forward to any questions you may have. And with that, I'll hand it off over.
All right, thanks, Harun. So I'm Matthew Voss. I am sharing my screen. I am a rural policy data analyst with Iowa State's Public Science Collaborative. Today, I'll be talking about 2021 DSPG projects that Chris mentioned, working with Eager, Des Moines, and Central Iowa. And in this project, I was a graduate fellow, so I was the graduate fellow lead on the project. But I also have a unique experience with data science for the public good, because in the summer of 2020, the inaugural summer of DSPG, I was also an undergraduate intern. But today I'll be talking about the summer of 2021 project. This is the team. I was the graduate fellow, Drs. Isaac Cool and Dorius, faculty advisors. Aubrey Alvarez is the executive director of Eat Greater Des Moines and was our client. And then Zach Johnson, Ellie Urhammer, and Saul Brashtovsky were our 3 undergraduate interns. So what is Eat Greater Des Moines? It's a nonprofit in Des Moines, of course, that works to reduce food insecurity. But rather than taking maybe more typical food pantry approach, they actually operate in the space of food rescue. And essentially what that is they collect donations of surplus food. And those donations might come from restaurants, grocery stores, gas stations, even convention centers that might have like buffets, for instance. And Eat Greater Des Moines actually comes and picks up that food. So they have volunteers or staff come and pick up the food either in their cars or they also have a refrigerated truck. And Eat Greater Des Moines picks up that food and takes it to organizations that can distribute it quickly. So that might be a food pantry, but it also might be a church. It might be a housing complex. It might be other nonprofits or community refrigerators, things like that. So then people who need the food can get it quickly. And what's special about food rescue is that it can operate with perishable food, where many food pantries only take non-perishable food. So our project using the community learning through data-driven discovery model started with a data discovery. And in this, we really wanted to learn from our client from Eat Greater Des Moines what sort of questions they were looking to get answered. So on the right, you can see some of those questions, things like what type of food is available, what communities are in most need of food, how much food is available, things like that. So those sorts of questions really drove our project. So as many data scientists might know, data cleaning is always a big step and often ends up taking more time than you were expecting. This project was no different, but it was really even more of a challenge and opportunity because we were working with a nonprofit that actually does collect a lot of data. But in many cases, the format wasn't the easiest to work with. So like on the left, you can see an Excel workbook where we really had to standardize the format between pages and do a lot of work cleaning the data to make it usable for us. But once we were able to do that, we got to really dive in and try to answer some of those questions you saw previously. So one of those questions was just basic, who needs food? So for this, you can see this map uses American Community Survey data, estimating the proportion of households receiving SNAP benefits in each zip code in the Des Moines metropolitan area. And in the black box there, you can see some zip codes where there were a higher proportion of households receiving SNAP benefits. So we were thinking that that may indicate that those are neighborhoods, communities that really can benefit most from Eat Greater Des Moines' food rescue efforts. So then we wanted to try to answer the question of where is food coming from and going? Where are Eat Greater Des Moines' efforts going to those people who can most benefit from them? So on the left, you can see food donation locations. Each of those dots is a place that donates food, and the circles are bigger if they donate more. And you can see that many of the largest donation locations are in the suburbs or exurbs of Des Moines. In the west, you have West Des Moines and Waukee, Ankeny in the north, Altoona and Bondurant in the northeast. So that's where food is coming from. And then on the right, you can see where food is going. And you can see that the picture looks very, very different. And the box now is roughly the same as the box on the previous slide to show that a lot of the food is going to those neighborhoods that we think can most benefit from it. So that's a really good sign for Eat Greater Des Moines' efforts that they are being effective in getting food to people who can benefit from it most. So some lessons learned in this project, like I mentioned, it was interesting working with a nonprofit community organization eCredit Des Moines just has a few full-time staff members. They have limited resources. They depend a lot on donations and things like that. So we really wanted to create something that was sustainable for them, that they could continue to use, whether that's updating the data or just continuing to share it with funders, things like that. So we tried to create sustainable data pipelines, and that included handing off the data to them in Google Sheets. That included creating a dashboard in Google Data Studio. And that was all with the effort to make it something that would work for them. And now I'll show a little clip from Aubrey Alvarez, the Executive Director of eCredit Des Moines, talking about some of our work that summer.
eCredit Des Moines was excited to work with the Data Science for Public Good team because they were really giving us an opportunity to take information and data that we've known but had a really hard time sharing and explaining with not only our board and supporters, but also our partners. So these interactive maps are going to give us a way to show the opportunity in regards to food recovery in our community and allow consumers or policymakers, really anyone who's interested, to not only see what it looks like in their neighborhood, but then also zoom out and see what it looks like as a community. And that's really, we're excited to see how this moves our work and our community forward. eCredit Des Moines.
So they were really interested in the opportunities that could show in the community. And what's exciting about this project is over a year later, it has had some impact. On the left, you can see a little snippet from eCredit Des Moines' newsletter this summer in July. They referenced our work and linked to it. And then they also talked about updating the list of businesses that were participating with them, the list of their partners, and keeping it on their website so they could continue to show it to funders in the community. And then on the right, you can see what the dashboard looks like shortly after we handed it off to them. We gave control over the dashboard to them, and they went ahead and made changes, and they added some more context, they added some more information to really make it useful for their funders and what they wanted to do with it. And with that, let me know if you have any questions about this project, about DSPG, about my experiences working in DSPG. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it over to Kelsey.
Great, thank you for kicking that my way. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so can I get a thumbs up if you are able to see my screen with my presentation? All right, great. So my name is Kelsey Van Selous, and I'm from Iowa State University. I'm currently a PhD student in Human Development and Family Studies, and also a project manager and data analyst for Iowa State's Public Science Collaborative. So today I'm here to talk about a case study from the summer of 2020 project from Iowa State's Data Science for the Public Good program about alcohol use in Iowa. So this is a case study that evidences the full life cycle that a summer project can have, as this is a project that started with the program and then grew into 3 contracts over the last few years. And we were able to continue and expand the study of alcohol use in Iowa. So each of these projects also use the CLD3 model that each of the other presenters mentioned today to engage the processes of data science and community engagement throughout each of the projects. And now I'm also using this topic for my dissertation in human development and family studies. So this is a team that helped support the project from 2020 and onward. The people highlighted in the blue squares here are students that supported the project in the summer of 2020. This includes a graduate fellow, undergraduate interns, and graduate research assistants. And then the people in the red circles are the faculty that have been involved in the project. And this includes members from community extension, statistics, sociology, and human development and family studies. And then 3 of the students from the summer of 2020 cohort received continued funding to continue working on the project. So this project is a really important issue in Iowa, as alcohol is the most frequently misused substance in the state. And just as of this week, we received new data in that ranks Iowa as the 2nd highest state for excessive binge drinking rates in the country. So you'll see in the map here on the left is that Iowa is actually situated within a high binge drinking region in the Midwest. And this is of concern not only for the health risks related to alcohol use, but also because it costs the state $2.6 billion annually in costs related to healthcare, crime, and car crashes, as well as lost work productivity. So here you will see an example of how the Data Science for Public Good program first addressed this issue in Iowa, where they created this dashboard that was able to visualize the demographics of alcohol use, so who's using alcohol in the state, as well as the liquor sales and alcohol-related crashes. So this research program really had impact. After the program was completed, the project was discussed in professional networks, which raised interest in the topic and the project in general. And this resulted in 3 new funded projects in my dissertation that I mentioned earlier. So the new funded projects are led by the Public Science Collaborative, where we focused on data discovery and data-centric partnerships, as well as worked with local stakeholders to obtain data and learn about their needs. We also scanned for new health and safety data to add to the project. And I've listed the data partnerships and data points here in case you're interested to learn more. So this led us to build a new visual dashboard designed for non-technical audiences. And this can be used directly by communities to see their alcohol use landscape. And I'll walk through a couple examples of what is included in the tool. So one of the features that we added to the tool is the location of alcohol outlets or places that sell alcohol. And we have 2 different types visualized in the tool. We have on-premise outlets, which are visualized by the green dots here. And those are outlets that are like restaurants or bars, anywhere where you can consume alcohol on premise. And then we also have the off-premise consumption, which is the blue dots here. And those are your gas stations, grocery stores, liquor stores, anywhere that sells alcohol for consumption elsewhere. And then we also signaled areas with high concentrations of alcohol outlets by creating these clusters that you can see on the right. So these are the squiggly lines that are around the alcohol outlets, and these are significant of areas with 5 or more outlets within 0.15 miles of each other. We also included alcohol outlet or alcohol liquor sales data for 11 years of data for the entire state. And then we also had some violations data that we were able to add for the state, which includes violations involving minors. And these are evidenced here in the red dots on the map here and can be seen within the clusters of alcohol outlets. In this tool, we also piloted additional health and safety data based on call for service data or 911 calls for 4 Iowa communities. And here our goal was to really translate the data into a tool to help communities see relationships between outlets and the safety variables in their communities. Here's one of the examples of a community, it's Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And this is an example of where we mapped the call for services that were related to violence. So in this example, the darker shades show areas with high calls for service related to violence, and then the alcohol outlet clusters can be layered right on top. So you can actually see some patterns of locations that have high calls for service related to violence, as well as the alcohol outlet clusters right on top. We also visualized calls related to family stressors. These calls include calls related to intimate partner violence, child abuse, or neglect. And here you can see family-related calls are also high in areas with high outlet densities. And this is a smaller town in Iowa. This map also shows alcohol-related crashes, which are the red X's on the map, which are also surrounding the alcohol outlet clusters here. So it's also important to note that these calls signal economic burdens for communities. So in this example, this map is showing calls related to alcohol, which are public intoxication, or calls related to operating while intoxicated. So these calls cost money or cost communities money and valuable resources to deploy these reactive services. So any alcohol related call is 100% preventable and could save communities a lot of money and resources. Another unique feature of the tool is that it does allow communities to think about harm reduction in their communities. So this example here shows a community that has their alcohol outlets separated from schools. The schools are represented by the purple triangles here and are highlighted in that circle in the middle there. So it's just a really wonderful tool to think about not only where are there places that could use intervention, but what are the communities that are already have natural harm reduction configurations. And so, as mentioned earlier, we did implement the community learning through data-driven discovery process, and we're continuing to implement that process throughout our continued project work. And right now we're in this ACT phase where we're really supporting communities learn how to act with the data in the tool. And we're doing this over the course of 5 different steps. So we're providing communities training on how to use the tool that I just mentioned. And then we're also hosting workshops to support communities think about data-driven, design-driven interventions to know what to do with the tool and to support interventions in their communities. We're always continuing to update the data to collect more data and keep it as real time as we can. And then we're assessing for best practices for measurement strategies in rural areas. A lot of the literature to date is in urban areas. So we're always thinking about what is the best way to measure alcohol outlet densities in places like Iowa. And then we're also collaborating with other states. So we're currently working with the state of Alabama to show them how we implemented alcohol outlet density measurement in Iowa. So if you have any questions, this is the contact information of the principal investigator of the study, as well as my contact information here. So I will stop my share and kick it out to the group, I think, for questions and comments.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all for those great presentations. That was really informative and I think really demonstrates the diversity of the problems and communities that you all are working with. It's such a huge range of activities and challenges that these communities have. I have so many questions that I want to ask you all. So maybe I'll get things started off, but we do have other folks on the call who may want to ask questions as well. I'll open this up to everybody, but I'm wondering, a lot of our student organizations that we work with are very interested in doing this kind of real work with communities, trying to solve real problems, working with real people rather than textbook kinds of examples in a class setting. And so I'm wondering, you have a really interesting mix of programs and projects that were listed off. That sort of implies that there's a lot of outreach to communities and working with them, building those relationships to have that trust that you're going to give them a partnership that benefits them rather than being an extractive kind of relationship. And so I wonder if someone could talk a little about that process of developing those relationships, looking for projects that are scopable to having students work on them for a semester or two. How has that worked for you in running this program?
Super good question, John. I'll take a quick stab and then anyone else wants to jump in, feel free. I think 2 secrets to our success here in Iowa is one is the model we use. It's the engagement model that Cass references, community learning through data-driven discovery. That's about partnerships. It's about partnerships. It's about people. And it's this connecting and saying, what's your problem? Or what's your hope? What's your aspiration? What are you trying to do? And as data scientists, can we partner with you to help? And, Cass talked about this. We start with data, we get analytics, but then we move on from there. It does build on a partnership. And I'll say a second one, and certainly Cass or Chris especially can speak to this, is we've embedded these programs in Extension. And for those of you who don't know, Extension is a nationwide network that penetrates down to every county in the country. And our extension professionals throughout the country, they have deep and long-term relationships at the county level with businesses and community groups and cities and counties. And they have trust and they listen and they learn and they're there to help. And so partnering with that organization in particular, it's just been really helpful to connect students to meaningful projects up and down the pipeline.
I was going to make those exact 2 points. Oh, I'll go over to you, Chris.
Okay. I was just going to add, the CLD3 wheel is, that whole process is super important. But I will say, one of the challenges when you do start to work with new groups that maybe we don't have a relationship with quite yet. We might have some relationship with them in extension. One of the challenges, you do have to work with that client to help them understand the importance of that data discovery piece, because traditionally I feel like a lot of the individuals we've worked with, they haven't given as much time or recognition of what it takes to actually do a good data discovery. And the problem is they kind of think, well, if the data is not there, we're just going to move on and we're going to use this piece of data set we have. Can you take this data set we have, crunch it, and make us a product? And we're kind of like, whoa, we're missing a bunch of stuff here. There's other data here, but we are going to have to work with it to extract it. That's going to take time. We're going to have to examine what its quality is. We're going to have to correlate it with other items to see if it actually is what we think it is. And that's all part of that data discovery process. And it's really important. And what I've been finding is once teams or clients have gone through that and they recognize and see what we're able to do at that phase of this project, it makes the rest of the project go so much smoother. And that's why I truly believe that's why so many of our projects have continued on after DSPG. Even with a project that comes with a lot of data already that they have, helping them understand what the data means and truly what they do have in terms of there's other things they might have had they might not have recognized, for them has been great value. So that's all before we even get to the analysis and trying to actually do something with the data. So it's a very key piece of DSPG.
That was amazing. I'm just going to say yes, yes, and yes. I'm glad this is recorded because we'll just make a little video of you two. That was fantastic. But I do want to highlight one thing, John, that you said, which is this is community driven. And just quick story, a turning point, I think, in my career is I was in this large group meeting with all of these local and state government officials. And I was one of maybe 2 or 3 non-government officials, and I was an academic. And in that, someone told a story about, well, you know how academics are. They come into a room and say, let me tell you how I can help you. And the worst thing you ever hear is when they ask you, how can I help? And the person in the front of the room made the joke and said, yeah, I mean, it's like they think they're Navy SEALs coming down from the ceiling and like being there, and then they're going to help you. And then all of a sudden they disappear and go back up and you never see them again. And the room like laughed and laughed and laughed to a point where I was super uncomfortable. Like, whoa, there's a lot of feelings here that is driving this laughter. But it was really a powerful time for me, and asking a lot of follow-up questions from that to be thinking about, how do we avoid that? How do we avoid that feeling of being extractive or just showing up and telling you that we have all the answers, but of listening, of letting the communities drive the conversations, and of engaging in the process that way. So I think that's part of the secret that's in the sauce of the work we try to do together.
Absolutely. Thank you all for those responses. So I guess my follow-up to that question is, I asked you how you initiate those relationships, and then the follow-up is, you know, a lot of these communities don't really have the resources to maintain you know, data analytics dashboards and IT systems. And so what is your thinking and your experience around the sustainability of some of these, where folks would like to continue to use what you help them build, but they may not have the resources to really sustain that in the long term?
I'll take a quick crack and say, one of the things that's cool from a data science perspective is, and a little bit different, is often like, say, a consultant or market researcher, each client is distinctive and special. But as data scientists, we like to think in terms of things like big data and fast data and N equals all. Let's not look at one community. Let's build something that can speak to all communities. Harun's project was a good example, Kelsey's as well, where the statewide, building these analytics, building community level indicators, but for all the communities or for all of the counties. And then organizations and shops like Chris runs a great indicators program that houses those data in extension and keeps those websites up and keeps those data current. So cool programs like DSPG can build statewide community-based data-driven infrastructure in a cool 10-week project or program like you heard. And then folks like Chris can take that and expand that and keep it up and running. And now it's a resource for every community. And you may have started by just partnering with a single one.
And I can add, for my project, a lot of the, I mean, we've used a ton of different analytics, a ton of different programming along the way. And one of the latest programs that I've been using is R, which is a free program and a free software. So I know when I'm thinking about the longevity and sustainability of these analytics and how to create these dashboards and things like that, I'm just thinking about what are the open source programs, what are the free programs that maybe a community can use, and how can I document this in a way that somebody else could reproduce it, that would make it easy for somebody else to pick up the project. Maybe that's a community member or somebody else supporting the community member, to just keep it sustainable over time. I see some head nods from Harun here because I saw his code was all available on his site too.
But John, you do bring up a really good point, and maintaining data. First, it's not as much fun as building the stuff initially, right? We all know that. But it's a very important piece for the communities, and every project, every community is different. And so when we do get involved with projects after DSPG or what have you, we do start to look at the process that project was done. Where can we streamline things? What are the inputs coming in? In the case where the inputs coming in are pretty much, pretty standard stuff, we can help set it up so those can be, the client might be able to bring those in, and we can or they can quickly add those pieces to it. But in some cases, the data coming in is going to still, no matter what, it's going to need a significant amount of cleaning or managing and looking at. And we can look at processes, we can save processes. And I know that Harun had talked about that, showing the scripts that we did for the DSPG project, making sure that what we have done, we also make public and we show those processes. So it's not just the clients we're working with today, but down the road, another group says, hey, I really like that project. How can we do that? They can go back and look at stuff like we've put on GitHub here for these projects and see the process we went through and then be able to replicate. So reproducible data or reproducible processes are very important.
I think I'd add, with a project with Seeger Des Moines, it was all about sort of just meeting the organization where they were at. In our case, they weren't an organization necessarily where we could even hand off reproducible code to them, because that would have taken extra experience that they didn't have. So in that case, we were using some free tools that Kelsey talked about, but even even more basic things like Google Sheets and things like that, where part of it was just demonstrating how data can be constructed to make the data dashboard work and things like that. So yeah, in that case, it was really just meeting the organization where they were at, and helping them to just start using their data that, like Aubrey said in that video, using their data that they knew they had, but they didn't quite know how to use it.
Great. Thank you all for those responses. We are at the top of the hour, and so I want to be mindful of people's time. If you need to drop off here, I completely understand that. I wanted to follow up with a question to the students, though, if you're able to stay on for a moment or two, to sort of build on those last responses. You all have seen each other's work in these three projects and beyond at this point, and so I'm wondering if you have seen opportunities for maybe combining some of the data in these projects that would sort of lead to that next step of building a more valuable set of resources for folks who are not current clients. I'm thinking, for example, of Kelsey's example of overlaying some of the alcohol sales data with school locations. Those are two data sets that aren't in the same data collection workflow, for example, but if you put them together, you can learn something interesting and new there. And so have you all seen examples like that where you think, hey, what if we combine these data sets, we might be able to answer this question that nobody has been able to answer before?
I think if I can say something to it, I was surprised at how many people actually showed up to our client meetings that we had throughout the data science program. I was expecting maybe 2, 3, 4 people from the Department of Human Rights. In comes a Zoom meeting of 40, 50 people. I was like, wow. But I think the big thing with that was a lot of our questions that the Department of Human Rights wanted answered were also very helpful for a lot of the sort of auxiliary departments that came in. And eventually the discussion became not just sort of what the head department wanted, but what was useful for everybody in those departments. And sometimes it was a hit and miss where they wanted something that really wasn't feasible or was going to take longer time than the 10 weeks we had for the DSPG project. But we tried to be as encompassing as possible, I think. And the Department of Human Rights did recognize that for sure.
And I can speak to the alcohol project for a couple different reasons. One is just earlier this week, I messaged Matt and we collaborated on how we could best figure out which variables to use from the American Community Survey. So I know just, constant communication and coordination and sharing knowledge with each other has been really helpful for advancing the alcohol project. And then the alcohol outlet density methods to measure and to cluster the alcohol outlets, I think could also be really useful in this food insecurity space too, where you could use the same methods for looking at food deserts or childcare deserts or resource deserts for mental health. So I think there's a lot of potential to overlap the projects with both just the data, methods, and topics. So I think it's a great question.
Yeah, I think the collaboration and learning from different projects has been very useful. I mean, I can speak to Harun's presentations and all of the data science presentation for the public good presentations from this summer. I attended a few of them in part just because I wanted to learn what kinds of data sets they were using that I didn't know about, and think about if there was any way that we could use them at the Public Science Collaborative or things like that. So yeah, learning that sort of knowledge sharing has been, I think, really, really helpful and useful.
Very good. Thank you all. You have been very generous with your time today. Thank you for being here. And this has been really interesting to hear about all these activities. And so as we talked about before we started the session today, the Hub is very interested in helping you amplify this work and helping to build this community of early career scholars in the Midwest who are interested in combining data science work with community impact kinds of projects. And so I do anticipate that we will continue these conversations, and folks who are watching this recording who may be in a student organization who are interested in these kinds of projects, we'd be happy to hear from you as well and talk with you about potential opportunities in the Midwest where you may be able to have your own impact in these ways as well. Cass, Shawn, Chris, any final thoughts from you before we wrap up here?
Just, I think we recorded a few links over in the chat. If you have a chance to capture those and put those in with the notes, that'd be great.
Will do.
Thank you.
I just dropped my email, and I'd encourage the other folks here to drop theirs as well into chat and just say, feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you. And also our teams are, growing, and the SPG is always looking for good people, as well as good projects. So let us know if you hear of a good project that you think would be worthwhile to put all of these great minds thinking about. We have loved the undergraduate and graduates who are the sort of heart and soul of these programs.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Thanks very much, everybody.
Yep.